Greetings. I am Thomas Hayward Jr., planter, judge, and patriot of South Carolina. I was young when I signed the Declaration of Independence, barely in my 30s, but I had seen enough of tyranny to know that justice, true justice, demanded action. Tyranny had no place in a land that called itself free. I signed for South Carolina, for my neighbors, and for every soul who deserved a voice in their own government, and I paid the price. In 1780, the British captured me during the defense of Charleston. I was imprisoned in St. Augustine, taken from my family, my home, and my land. But they could not take my resolve. I was one of only 5 signers of the Declaration to actually be imprisoned by the British. And yet, like the others, I refused to recant, refused to bow. Even behind bars, I upheld my pledge. And after the war, I returned to my land and to my duty. I helped rebuild a battered South Carolina, even composing the state's first constitution. Remember this, friend. Liberty survives only when it is defended. I signed in a time of war. You must stand in a time of peace, so that freedom endures.
I'm Elbridge Gerry. I was a merchant, revolutionary, and eventually vice president. By 1776, it was clear to me the British Crown had no intention of treating us as equals, so I voted for liberty. I was a Harvard man and politically sharpened by Samuel Adams. When British troops marched on Lexington, I was nearly seized at Menotomy Tavern, escaping into a cornfield in my nightclothes. A less than dignified moment, I confess. I joined the Second Continental Congress in 1776 and made a full-time job of asking tough questions and annoying British sympathizers. Years later, during the Constitutional Convention, I helped broker the Great Compromise, the one that gave us the House and the Senate split. Later, I served as governor of Massachusetts, but history, alas, is not always fair. In 1812, a redistricting bill passed under my governorship, fashioned to favor my party. Though I found it highly disagreeable, I signed it. And one district, a contorted serpent of a map, was likened to a mythological salamander. The cartoonist dubbed it a gerrymander. So now the term gerrymandering lives on, named after me, mispronounced ever since. Let my legacy instead be tied to a quote I still believe. It is the duty of every man, though he may have but one day to live, to devote that day to the good of his country.
My name is William Floyd. I was born on Long Island near the edge of the sea. When my father died, I was barely in my 20s, and the land became my charge. From it, I raised crops, cattle, and character. Could not stand idle while Parliament taxed and ruled us like children across an ocean. By the time I signed the Declaration of Independence, I was 41 years old, a husband, a father, and a general in the militia. Knowing the cost, I signed anyway. Just before we signed the Declaration, a nervous delegate said, "Floyd, if we get our necks in the noose for this, you'll kick half an hour after I'm quiet." I reckon he was right. I was built for hard work and hard battles. Shortly after the British invaded Long Island, they took my home. My wife and children fled under threat of fire and sword, but we did not yield. I took up command in the militia, rose to Major General, and helped carry the war forward. My family, like this country, endured, rebuilt, and reclaimed what was lost. Liberty comes at a cost. I paid it willingly. So must you.
My name is Josiah Bartlett, physician by calling, patriot by choice. I began practicing medicine at 21, armed with little more than a pocketful of bark, a few tools, and the fierce determination to do right by my neighbors. When fever swept through my town, I did the unthinkable. I gave my patients cool cider, not scalding broth. And when diphtheria struck, I used Peruvian bark, quinine. When others bled or starved their patients, medicine taught me to preserve life. One must confront what threatens it, and liberty, like health, withers without vigilance. When the crown taxed without consent, I stood against it, first in our assembly, then in Congress. My house was burned for it. I rebuilt it. Then, when vote came for independence, I made the rafters shake with my "I!" I was the first to vote, and the second to sign. A nation was born in that chamber, and a doctor's oath, first to do no harm, applies still. Defend this republic, lest it perish from neglect.
Good day, friend. I am George Reed, lawyer, legislator, and some say, proud father of Delaware. When I first counseled the Crown as Attorney General, I urged reconciliation, but when the King turned his back on our pleas, I joined the Congress in 1774. A diplomat at heart, I voted against independence at first. I hoped for peace. I later signed that noble declaration with full conviction. I wrote Delaware's first constitution, helped frame her laws, and stood firm in her defense when British troops seized my home and took my wife captive. I was on the run for 6 years, yet I did not waver. I was there in 1776 and again in 1787 to frame our new constitution. Small states like mine needed a voice. Delaware ratified the Constitution first, and I was proud to sign it. A nation was forming. I saw it clearly. Let no one fear the states. The people are with us. Now it is your turn. Guard the Republic well.
I am William Ellery, clerk of the court, quack lawyer turned delegate, a member of Congress, one of the Lords of Admiralty, a judge, a loan officer, a son of Rhode Island, and a signer of the Declaration of Independence. I came to Congress because I could not stand idle while liberty was put in chains. I was no stranger to risk. I knew that putting my name on that parchment might cost me everything. And it did. The British torched my home in Newport, leaving nothing behind. Still, I counted the cost worth paying. For to do good in public life, one must dare to be disliked. My signature was written in an elegant secretarial hand, meant to be read plainly and remembered. I might have been short in stature, but I stood tall for liberty. I did not stop at signing. I served in Congress for over a decade, sat on more than 30 committees, and labored day and night to shape the soul of a new republic. I was also known for my love of epigrams, short poetic truths with sharp edges. Resolved to serve no man more faithfully than your country. At home I sired 17 children, outlived 2 wives, and by Providence's favor lived well into my 90s, one of only 3 signers to do so. We pledged our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That wasn't poetry. It was a promise. The republic we built was fragile then. It still is. Remember, freedom once tasted is never forgotten, even in chains.
Welcome. I'm Robert Morris, merchant, patriot, and steward of a revolution that nearly bankrupted me, but never broke me. When I arrived in America at 14 from Liverpool, I had no family but ambition. By the time war stirred these colonies, I'd built a thriving mercantile empire, and when liberty called, I answered. I did not vote for independence on July 2nd. I feared chaos. When the time for the vote came, I left the room so that independence could pass without my dissenting vote. But once committed, I signed with resolve. It is the duty of every man to act in whatever station his country may call him to in times of distress. My country called, I answered. I helped found our Navy, launched our first national bank, and poured my own fortune into Washington's army. At Yorktown, when the troops needed pay, I paid them. They called me the financier of the revolution. I simply did what had to be done. Freedom has costs. I bore them. Now what we so dearly bought is for you to keep.
Good day. I am Richard Henry Lee of Virginia. I stood in the pews at St. John's Church when Patrick Henry cried, "Give me liberty or give me death." He and I believed that it was time for Virginia to lead, and we did. On June 7, 1776, I rose in Congress and declared, "These united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states." John Adams seconded. Congress postponed a debate till July 1st, but the words stood. A committee led by Jefferson shaped the Declaration from my resolution. Though absent for the final vote, I returned to sign the document that began our nation. I would go on to help draft the Articles of Confederation and serve as President of Congress. A man who loves liberty should never grant to rulers an atom of power that is not necessary for the safety and well-being of society. It is now yours to guard that liberty and grant to no government more power than is truly necessary.
If you've ever glanced at our glorious Declaration of Independence for more than a moment, you've no doubt seen my name. I made certain King George did not miss John Hancock. Born in Massachusetts, I was raised among wealth, but I wagered all of it on the cause of liberty. When the king taxed us without our say, I refused to bow. They called me a smuggler. I called it resistance. As president of the Continental Congress, it was my duty and my honor to be the first to sign the Declaration of Independence. And I signed big, so there'd be no mistake. Some say there may have been a price on my head. I gave them every reason to raise it. I said, "There, John Bull can read my name without spectacles, and may now double his reward from my head." I believed if liberty was worth fighting for, it was worth risking everything. I put my fortune to use on behalf of the cause, giving what I had to help birth this republic. That signature of mine, it made history. Even now people say, "Put your John Hancock here." Imagine that, a name turned symbol. Later, I became the first elected governor of Massachusetts under our state's new constitution. But no title meant more than that moment in Philadelphia, when we pledged our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, and we meant every word. Liberty is not given, it is claimed and kept. Let my signature serve as a symbol to inspire you to add your own name to the cause of liberty.
Good morrow. I am Martha Washington, wife, mother, patriot, and witness to the birth of a nation. I did not carry a musket or sign a declaration, but make no mistake, I served the cause of liberty. While my husband led armies, I walked among them. I left the comfort of Mount Vernon to travel to winter encampments, to sew garments, tend the wounded, lift spirits, and remind our soldiers what they fought for. It's not just soldiers who fight in wars. I was in the snow at Valley Forge, saw boots without soles, men without rations, but never without courage. And in that bitter winter, I did what I could to warm the fire of freedom, with words, with work, with presence. Some called me Lady Washington. Others simply called me strong. But I tell you this, the revolution was not just fought on battlefields. It was endured in kitchens, cabins, and quiet prayers. I buried children. I endured war. I kept the home fires burning, not knowing if I'd ever see George again. I did not choose war, but I chose to stand in it. When we finally saw peace, I longed only for quiet. But liberty, once born, is never truly quiet again. So hear me, dear one. Freedom is not the burden of soldiers alone. It belongs to all of us. My duty is done. Yours is not. Carry it well. And if ever you wonder what one soul can do in great times, remember mine.
You may not know my voice, but you've surely seen my handiwork. I am Betsy Ross, an upholsterer, a widow, a patriot, and, as the story goes, the woman who stitched the first American flag. I fought in our revolution, not with muskets and powder, but with needle and thread. In those early days, even a single star sewn in defiance of a crown was an act of rebellion. I lost a husband to this war, killed a militia explosion. I lost business, sleep, and security, but I never lost heart. As I recall it, when George Washington came to my shop with a sketch and a vision, I offered more than a design. He showed me a flag with 6 pointed stars, but I told him 5 would be quicker to cut and just as fine. He agreed. 13 stars, 13 stripes, one united cause. It was just cloth, but it carried courage. It flew over camps, over homes, over battles, stitched not only with thread, but with hope. I was not alone. Women across the colonies spun linen, mended uniforms, melted pewter into bullets, and sent sons to war. It wasn't only men who built this country. It was mothers, wives, daughters, seamstresses. So, no, I didn't sign the Declaration, but I left my mark in every wave of that flag. Some think I was spinning a yarn about my involvement with the flag, but my story speaks to something far more important. Back then, flags were more utilitarian than symbolic. And what a mighty symbol it's become. Let it remind you that even the smallest stitch can hold together the greatest cause.
I am Oliver Wolcott, soldier, judge, and son of Connecticut. I was the 14th of 15, raised on Northern strength and Puritan discipline. When the War for Independence came, I answered both callings, serving in Congress by pen and on the battlefield by sword. I wrote in 1776, a final separation between the countries I consider unavoidable. I was not in Philadelphia on July 4th. Illness kept me away. But on July 9th, I was in New York City when General George Washington read the Declaration to his troops. In the aftermath, I witnessed the King's statue at Bowling Green being toppled by patriots. What was left of the statue was moved to my orchard back in Litchfield. There, we melted the lead into bullets. Over 42,000, they say. My wife and children helped forge them. We took a symbol of tyranny and turned it into ammunition for liberty. When I returned to Philadelphia in the autumn, I signed the Declaration with full conviction. I had already seen enough to know we would not go back. In war and in peace, I served my state as congressman, general, and eventually governor. But I never forgot that moment in my orchard. Even now, I believe what we tear down must serve to build something better. Let your hands be ready for labor and liberty both.
How do you do? My name is Richard Stockton, lawyer, judge, and reluctant revolutionary. I did not rush toward independence. I believed first in reasoned petition, in loyalty to crown and country alike. But when Parliament shut its ears to justice and our rights were trampled, I knew where duty lay. On July 1st, 1776, I arrived late to Congress, soaked to the skin from a thunderstorm, just in time to hear the closing moments of John Adams' passionate rally for independence. I asked him to repeat what I had missed. Though reluctant at first, Mr. Adams repeated his stirring speech. I believed then, and believe now, he is a man to whom the country is most indebted for the great measure of independency. Signing the Declaration cost me dearly. That November, I was dragged from my bed by loyalists, marched through snow in my night clothes, and thrown in irons by the British. They starved me in a New York prison, leaving me broken and near death. I survived, but not without loss. My health, my home, my law library, gone. My family displaced. My honor, though, I never relinquished. Some whisper that I begged a pardon. Let them whisper. I took no oath to any king, only to my country. I gave all I had in its service, and I would again. Let them who inherit this liberty remember, it is not forged in comfort, but in trial. It is not kept by ease, but by resolve.
I am Samuel Chase, signer of the Declaration, voice of the people, and, some said, fiery orator of Maryland. The British taxed us without our say. I saw firsthand how Parliament twisted power into profit. Corruption had become the art of British rule. I no longer held the least hope in their wisdom or virtue. I declared our only reliance must be on God and ourselves. So I led protests in Annapolis, rallied tradesmen and farmers, and saw to it that no paper was sold under that cursed Stamp Act. When the call for independence came, Maryland hesitated. I rode to every county, stirred the hearts of men, and returned with full authority to cast our vote for liberty. I signed the Declaration, and years later stood trial myself for speaking too boldly as a judge. But I never bowed, and I never will. Let that be your inheritance.
My name is Francis Lewis, merchant, delegate from New York, and signer of the Declaration of Independence. I gave everything to the cause, and I would do it again. Was born in Wales and educated in England. But America was my dream. I told myself that's the place for a young man with brains and ambition. And venture to America I did, where I made my fortune. When war came, I gave that fortune to the war effort. I served in Congress, secured arms and clothing, and outfitted ships. Like all the signers, this made me a marked man. When the British took Long Island in 1776, they burned my home to the ground and destroyed all of my cherished possessions. But they did something much worse than that. They took my dear wife Elizabeth as prisoner. She never recovered from the ordeal and died in my arms. This was my punishment for signing the Declaration. But I would not turn back. Freedom demands much of us, but what it gives in return is everything.
You may find it curious that at just 26, I, Edward Rutledge, was the youngest man to sign the Declaration of Independence. I had a gift for words. Debate came easily. But when the question of independence came before us, I hesitated. Too soon. Too reckless, I said. But by July 2nd, I was fully committed to the cause. I helped turn South Carolina's vote because I saw the truth. We would rise together or not at all. Unity wasn't just principle, it was survival. I didn't just talk. I fought, rising to the rank of captain. During the siege of Charleston in 1780, I was captured by the enemy. They threw me into a dismal prison in Florida. When I was released in 1781, I returned home and served my beloved South Carolina as a legislator and finally governor until the end of my life. It doesn't take age to recognize the weight of history. Only courage and the will to speak and sacrifice when it matters most.
I am John Adams, blunt, stubborn, and the indispensable voice for independence in the Continental Congress. It called me obnoxious and disliked. I call it telling the truth. Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes or inclinations, they cannot alter the state of facts. In other words, friend, facts do not care about our feelings. While Jefferson penned the Declaration, I drove the debate, won the votes, and dared to speak when others hesitated. I stood on principle, even when it cost me popularity. I never stood alone. My Abigail, my conscience, my counselor, carried the burdens of home while steadying my heart with her wisdom. I became vice president, then president, but my proudest title was always patriot. Now the charge is yours. Guard liberty well, for once lost, it is lost forever.
Good day, friend. I am Benjamin Franklin, a printer by trade, a philosopher by inclination, and in the summer of 1776, simply known as a rebel. I had captured lightning from the skies with a kite and built a press that printed wisdom for the common man, but nothing compared to the moment when I signed my name to our Declaration of Independence, knowing full well it might be my death warrant. We must all hang together, or we shall most assuredly hang separately, I quipped. That day we pledged our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Respect this founding, friend. It is your inheritance, hard-won and fragile. Guard it well. My work is done. The future is yours.
I am Caesar Rodney of Delaware, sheriff, soldier, and the man who rode through a thunderstorm to cast a single vote. John Adams called me the oddest-looking man in the world, but he said there is sense and fire, spirit, wit, and humor in his countenance. I'll take that kindly. On July 1st, 1776, Delaware was split. One for independence, one against. I was 80 miles away and ill, but needed. So I rode through the night, and on the morning of July 2nd, still wearing my riding spurs, I broke the tie. That day, Delaware joined the cause. This nation was not built by perfect men, but by committed ones. Be the kind of person who rides through the storm.
I am Charles Carroll of Carrollton, the wealthiest of the signers and the last to survive. When I took up the Patriot cause, I did so knowing I had more to lose than most. My land, my fortune, my family's name, everything stood in jeopardy. But liberty, once awakened, demands no half measures. As the only Catholic to sign the Declaration, I knew both persecution and principle. I signed it as Charles Carroll of Carrollton to let it be known who I was and that I fully supported this cause. No ambiguity. I risked it all, not for reward, but for a free republic. The question is not what I gave, but what will you? You may find it curious that at just 26, I, Edward Rutledge, was the youngest man to sign the Declaration of Independence. I had a gift for words. Debate came easily. But when the question of independence came before us, I hesitated. Too soon. Too reckless, I said. But by July 2nd, I was fully committed to the cause. I helped turn South Carolina's vote because I saw the truth. We would rise together, or not at all. Unity wasn't just principle, it was survival. I didn't just talk. I fought, rising to the rank of captain. During the siege of Charleston in 1780, I was captured by the enemy. They threw me into a dismal prison in Florida. When I was released in 1781, I returned home and served my beloved South Carolina as a legislator and finally, governor, until the end of my life. It doesn't take age to recognize the weight of history. Only courage and the will to speak and sacrifice when it matters most.
My name is Button Gwinnett. Yes, friend, that is my real name. I am one of only 8 signers of the Declaration of Independence not born in North America. But I gave my voice, my loyalty, and my life to America. Because this great land of opportunity gave everything to me. I was a leading citizen of Georgia and helped write the state's constitution. During the Revolution, I sought command of Georgia's battalion. But much to my dismay, that commission went to Lachlan McIntosh. From that moment, we were rivals. He mocked me in public, called me a scoundrel and a lying rascal. So I did what honor demanded. I challenged him to a duel. 12 paces, 2 shots. He lay wounded. I lay dying. Upon news of my death, fellow signer Lyman Hall wrote this about me. His whole attention, influence, and interest seemed riveted to liberty. I died for honor, but I lived for independence. Let that be the part worth remembering.
I am Joseph Hughes, merchant, patriot, and signer of the Declaration of Independence. For about 20 years, I traded with Britain. I knew her ships, her markets, her reach. I stood to lose everything if we broke away. But when war came, I turned that knowledge toward a new purpose, building a navy for a fledgling nation that had none. In Congress, I helped commission our first warships and oversaw every shilling spent to outfit them. I promoted a bold young soldier in whom I had the utmost confidence, John Paul Jones. He would become the Revolution's greatest naval hero. John Adams said we laid the cornerstone of the American Navy. He was right. I died in service, far from home, worn down by the work, but I would do it again, for a country that rose from resistance and learned to command the sea.
I have often thought that true power lies not in the sword, but in the mind guided by principle. I am Thomas Jefferson, born on Virginia soil. And I once told John Adams, I cannot live without books. When Congress called upon me to draft our Declaration of Independence, I had but days to put quill to parchment, and the weight of centuries pressing on my shoulders. When the ink dried, the world shifted. Every word was a step into the unknown, a torch lit for posterity. As president, I spoke softly, but I had grand plans for this nation. In 1803, I nearly doubled the size of the country with the Louisiana Purchase. Westward expansion was vital for this nation's health and prosperity, and I envisioned an empire of liberty. We must guard liberty with learning, for freedom depends not on force, but on the cultivation of an enlightened mind.
My name is John Witherspoon. I was born in Scotland, a minister by calling, an educator by trade, never expecting to become a revolutionary. I came to America to lead a college. Back then, it was known as the College of New Jersey. You know it today as Princeton University. I crossed the sea to shape minds, yet found myself helping to shape a nation. At the First Continental Congress, when some said independence was premature, I rose and spoke out. The country is not only ripe for the measure, but in danger of rotting for the want of it. I sacrificed much. The British destroyed my home and my college. Those were material things and could be rebuilt, but I could never replace my dear son James. In the Battle of Germantown in 1777, he made the ultimate sacrifice. For my son and my adopted country, I did not waver. Liberty must be built not only on strength, but on principle, on conscience, and on courage. Let those who inherit this nation never forget, freedom is a gift, but it is also a test.
I I am Roger Sherman of Connecticut, a lawyer by trade and a founder by providence. I never went to school, but I studied law by candlelight and learned more from practice than from lectures. Without the benefit of a formal legal education, I was admitted to the bar in 1754. My friend Thomas Jefferson rightly gets the credit for writing our Declaration of Independence, but I helped outline and edit that document along with Ben Franklin, John Adams, and Robert Livingston, the Committee of Five. At the 1787 Constitutional Convention, it was the Connecticut Compromise, my proposal, that kept the states from falling apart. Equal votes for the states in the Senate, while population determines votes in the House of Representatives. But my proudest achievement was raising my many children. I had 15 in total. I stood fast when others broke. I did my part. Now you must do yours.
I am Stephen Hopkins of Rhode Island, a farmer's son, a shipbuilder, a judge. Of all the signers, only my trusted comrade, Ben Franklin, was older than me. I was one of the first to call for independence. In 1764, a decade before the Revolution, I wrote that the Crown has no right to tax the colonies without the consent of the people. In 1774, at the First Continental Congress, I saw where this was going. Powder and ball will decide this question, I told the assembled. I was right about that, too. When the moment came for me to sign the Declaration, my hands shook from illness. But as I signed that sacred parchment, I steadied my right with my left and said, "My hand trembles, but my heart does not. This nation was born in boldness. Keep it so, with clear minds and steady hearts."
I did not seek greatness. I only sought to fulfill my duties. My name is William Whipple of New Hampshire. I was born a merchant, became a general, and signed the Declaration not for fame, but for freedom. At Saratoga, I witnessed the British surrender, but I did not see it as a moment to gloat. Victory is not a parade. It is a responsibility. We had won a battle, yes. The real measure was whether we could prove worthy of the cause we had declared. In my letters, I shared my hope that slavery would end, and so I myself freed Prince, who was my own servant. How could I fight for liberty and deny it at home? Even as my health failed, I used what influence I had to press that cause forward. Writing to friends with care, for friendship, like freedom, must be tended. I served my country. Now I ask only this: may you have the courage to do the same.